I'm Patricia Thane, co founder of Private AI, and this is the Data Frontier podcast. Here we explore the frontier of data innovation where unstructured data meets real world applications. Each episode brings together builders, engineers, data scientists, product leaders, and domain experts who are shaping the future of intelligence systems. From NLP and privacy to interoperability and AI driven workflows, we unpack the tools, challenges, and breakthroughs transforming raw data into smarter systems, faster insights, and better solutions. It is my pleasure to have Dr. Chris O'Connor here today for the Data Frontier podcast. Chris, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, Patricia, and super excited to be here. Quickly, I'm Chris O'Connor. I'm the CEO of FirstHx. I'm also an internal medicine and critical care physician as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here. Chris, can you tell us a bit about your company, FirstHx?
So, First History is a digital twin of clinical knowledge. It's an adaptive knowledge-based solution that replicates the medical interview on your smartphone before you see your clinician. And so it interviews you the same way your clinician or physician would. So each question it asks is based on the previous answer. So if you give different answers, it will ask different questions. And it does a comprehensive, complete history of what's going on. It does your current symptoms. It will ask you about your past medical history, your medications, allergies, social determinants of health. It can screen for whether you're eligible for clinical trials. It can screen to see if you're getting the right treatment for, guideline-directed medical therapy. And it can do that all seamlessly in one go.
Why did you decide to build this?
So this is my second startup. I founded a company, Think Research, a number of years ago. And what Think Research did was it built knowledge-based structured checklists to help physicians order treatments for hospitalized patients. Because without order sets, you had to remember from memory from scratch all the different things that had to be ordered, and that was hard. And I thought, my goodness, what if you could just have a list of the things you needed commonly? Seems like such an obvious idea, minimal use. And so I thought, hey, and then the other idea I had to go along with that in our publicly funded healthcare system in Canada. Why is each hospital building their own order sets by themselves? Isn't there this thing called the internet where we can kind of learn and share? Wouldn't it be better to build a collaborative ecosystem? And with that idea, I founded Big Research. I grew it to projects across 8 countries: States, Canada, Iceland, Ireland, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and India at one point. We're 220 employees. It was awesome and it was a huge amount of fun. And then it went public and I had an exit. And so that was 2020. And so I was sitting at home, watering my plants, so to speak. Not totally watered my plants, but I was certainly sitting at home. And and, uh, and then I get a call from these two physicians who had been working. They said, "Hey," they said, "what do you actually do all day as a physician or a clinician? You interview people. And if ever there was an unstructured manual process," and they said, "we've been working on building a solution to this for a number of years. Would you like to join us, as the CEO?" And I said, what if we do the history taking what order sets did to ordering? And I was super excited, loved the problem set, and I dove right back in. There was about 4 weeks of downtime between the two. So yeah, I've been at it ever since.
So, you are asking patients to fill out their own forms. Is there anything that's surprising so far about the data that's been collected?
So the biggest surprise of my healthcare IT journey, which I've been doing for a number of years now, is I've been at the First History about a couple of weeks, maybe 4 weeks. And I can look at the back end of the application and see the patient ratings of their experience of completing the histories. And, I was expecting maybe half of them would like it. I mean, they're patients like anything, like they're a pretty tough crowd. And what I saw was, and it's true to this day, 95% approval. So patients love it. And they love it because it turns out they've got a challenge too. They want to tell their story. And if you read, there's all kinds of, they feel rushed, interrupted, hard to get their story out. particularly true for marginalized and disadvantaged groups. They find it even harder, and they love it because it's not a form, it's adaptive. So when we think intake, like giving you information before the medical interview, we've all been there. We've all sat in the doctor's office, and they hand you a clipboard or a digital form. You fill out the form. It takes a long time, and as I like to say, who here enjoys a good form fill? I haven't met anybody who enjoys filling forms. So forms are awful, and we're not a form. We're absolutely not. We replicate the interview. If we ask questions that are relevant to you, there is the experience. Boards asking stuff you don't care about. They don't ask about the things that you care about. The board needs to fill out, and then often people will say, "Then I got to my doctor, and they just ask me all the same questions anyway." It's terrible, terrible, terrible. Everybody's had an experience. So First History does it totally different. We actually built an experience that patients like, and so we engage the patients, help them tell their story, and they love it. And because they love it, they complete it. And our completion rates are sitting well over 90%.
Did you hint that it was more of a dynamic form?
So it's not really a form. It is a series of questions based on the previous answer. One of our biggest barriers is that all that people have had experience with is forms. And so they just think of intake in terms of forms and the limitations of forms. I get often asked, could you also do this thing over here? And the answer, well, yeah, we're the omni question machine. So because it's adaptive, like if you present with shortness of breath and I've got forms, what form do I send you? Do I send you a pneumonia form, an asthma form, a heart failure form? Too many forms. With us, I just send you a form. And because we're adaptive, it will ask you the relevant question. And if you've got an history of asthma, it will ask the questions around the asthma control test. And if you've, and it's very specific and very relevant to you, because patients do want to tell their story. And one of the challenges that somebody who does medical interviews, one of the biggest challenges is ending the interview on time. Patients have more to say, and there's only so much time. And so connecting with the patient effectively during a limited period of time, this really helps that because it gets the routine questions out of the way so that then you can focus on what you're really came for, like, what's wrong with me? What are you going to do about it? And what can I expect? And you want to spend more of the time with the patient engaged in those types of issues versus saying, do you have cough? Do you have sputum with your cough? What color is your sputum? Like, all that kind of data questions. So we can do that before you see your clinician.
I think you had mentioned in one of our last conversations that you found that patients filling in their own history was actually extremely accurate, which was surprising to folks.
Yes, and that's the other source of skepticism. There's a number of skeptics. People think, yeah, I just want to fill in inaccurate information. And our experience has been very accurate. They are very good at reporting. We have data, our data and analytics platform. We've got real-time data on everything patients enter into the system. And the statistics from heart failure and the medications they take for their heart failure is exactly what's reported in the medical literature. So we have a pretty good sense that it's pretty accurate what they do. And then the other source of this is all the people who use the application. All the physicians, nurses, and nurse practitioners, and they like it. And what's reported is, very, very accurate. That's not to say that the clinician doesn't adjust what they say, like, it's another, but overwhelmingly what they report is accurate.
So they'll fill in this dynamic questionnaire, and what happens to the data afterwards?
So when they complete, so when they've filled it out, and our data on average, it takes about 4 minutes. For more detailed specialty histories, it might take 10 or sometimes as long as 14 minutes, but that's unusual. Although I will say our completion rates do not change based on the length it takes to do. And I think that reflects because it is adaptive, it's all relevant stuff for them. So once they complete it, a digital file is created. And then because it's data, we can send the data where it needs to go. So most common place that's into the electronic medical record. So we can send it there so that when the patient walks through the door, the first history report's already inside the documentation area of an EMR. So we can do that. But it can go to other areas too, like provincial data repositories or the clinical trial coordinators if they're conducting research, or you name it. It can go where it needs to go.
So once the physician or the nurse practitioner or whomever is viewing the data from the medical side, once they have access to this from the EHR side or anywhere of their choosing, how do they react? Are they open to actually reading the patient's information?
I would say it's a good question. Sounds like you've dealt with clinicians before. So overall, so I would say that most physicians immediately get the value prop here. Like if you don't have to ask all the questions, it's going to save you time. And routine questions like for WIT scores and calculators, that clinicians will recognize these acronyms with CAN7, PH29, CHAD-VAS scores. These are questions related to risk factors. CHAD-VAS, for example, is the risk of having a stroke if you have atrial fibrillation. So there's a series of questions you have to have, and then you have to add them up and then calculate the score and record the score. Doing all of that is time consuming. So to get an application to do that for you, like fantastic. And so most people immediately see the value. And then I would say to the extent there's skeptical people out there, and sure, of course there's skeptical people out there, I just say use it. And then use it for a week or two and see for yourself. And then that usually brings people along.
Is there any way to check for the outcomes of the patients? How well the outcomes have improved when using First History versus not, for example?
We've got data showing it speeds clinicians up anywhere from 10 to 50%, depending on their practice. So we know that they can be more efficient. And we've got the data on the patients working it, and we've got the clinician reports. We've got that kind of data, definitely. The next leg of the journey is what you're saying is outcomes. And we are speaking to a number of organizations at this point in time to study those kinds of studies. They're a little more effortful. I like to think about this, though, however, it's a bit like parachute for gravitational challenge. Like this thing clearly works. Like having a structured knowledge-based report, I mean, how can that not help? And of course it's going to help. But that's not good enough. We need to study and prove it and quantify it. So I think quantifying it is highly valuable. And we are in the process of setting up a number of trials to look at exactly that.
Are there any trials that you've conducted or customer use cases that you could take us through that have some interesting figures you want to
So, sure. I would reference eVisit New Brunswick. So, virtual care platform, Province of New Brunswick, implement First History, and their wait time went down from like 6 hours down to 1 hour. Their efficiency went up, and more importantly, is they standardized care across all of their clinicians. And this is where you say, where's the maximum benefit of First History? Well, it's a little bit hard to say. Is it the patient engagement? Is it the clinician? Or is it the data powering the healthcare system? And they're all valuable, right? And the good news is you don't have to pick. You get all the benefits. But I think the biggest benefit from First History will be that we can start with standardized, complete, relevant, structured data sets collected by First History before they see the clinician. And that then we can start with that and then push that down through all the processes of care, through the medical interview and then after the interview. And I think that will have an enormous impact on the healthcare system.
So you said from 6 hours to 1 hour, and that's ER wait
Yes.
times?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any hypothesis as to what the main reasons that might be? Is it physicians spending less time writing? Is it less times trying to diagnose what is going on?
So it's interesting. What you choose to do with your efficiency depends on the clinician and the care setting. Some clinicians choose to use the efficiency to spend less time asking about symptoms and then more time engaging with patients. They don't actually speed up that much, speed up a bit, but for them, it's mostly a quality issue. We've had other clinicians on the other side of it, weight loss clinics, where they implemented First History and saw a huge improvement in efficiency. And they had a huge wait list as well. And then they implemented First History. I think there were 7 months wait lists, and they implemented First History, went down to 1 month. And so they were able to drive a lot of efficiency. So I think we know that there is Canadians without a primary care physician. So I think issues of efficiency do try and drive directly to system capacity and quality. And so I think this is only part of it. But it's not just an efficiency tool. When I joined First History, I have to admit my main motivation was efficiency. I mean, I do interviews, they take a long time. And, I trained as a respirologist. And if I had to ask another patient, "Do you have a cough? And do you have sputum with your cough?" It was the first 800 times, but, after a while, I asked that a few times. So we can automate that part, so I can spend my time on the part where it's the value add. That was my main motivation. And then I discovered patients like it, and we can empower patients. And then I discovered that the data that's collected underpins everything. Diagnosis, treatment, prognosis, navigation, triage, research, population health. This is the foundational data set that, in combination with other data sets, powers everything. And when you think about it now, if you've got, various EMRs, you really are relying on clinicians to ask the questions to get the data. Some of them use forms, but they're built on a one-off basis. Like clinician A builds a form this way, clinician B builds a different form with different language, different structures, and you can mitigate that to an extent, but it still does result in very fragmented and incomplete and difficult to use data sets. So if we can standardize this, I think there's an enormous opportunity.
Is there ever too much data?
Interesting question. So the answer to that is yes and no. So in terms of clinicians taking care of patients, the answer is absolutely yes. It's not even so much that there's too much, is that it's just not helpful. If I present with pain in my stomach, most of the time asking me about ankle pain isn't going to be helpful. It's just not relevant. And you can present it, and it's not that it's wrong, but it's not helpful. The key thing to make this adopted and used by clinicians is present them with the right information, the right amount, not too little, not too much, and the most helpful questions so that it helps them the most. And that's why it's a hard problem. Because you can have a solution with just ask 500 questions of every patient, and you'd have a huge block of data, and that would not be helpful. And if you don't ask enough, like a lot of forms don't really collect that much clinical information, then you're leaving a lot on the table. And so you want something that's in the middle. The other critical part of it is structuring it. So you've got a consistent standardized structure. And so it'll be easy to find if it's well structured. It'll be more usable. And so we're highly consistently structured.
Can you expand on that?
Sure. One of the things I like to say, let's think about a big knowledge object. If things are well organized, it's easy to find things. You know exactly where to look inside the structure. And often medical records, think about the last time you looked at a letter from your physician. There's a very good chance that it was an unstructured free text narrative paragraph. And if you're trying to get information out of that, and I experience this every day, my practice at the hospital uses a big EMR. And if I'm seeing a patient and I'm trying to figure out, they've got an irregular heartbeat, they're not on a blood thinner, and I'm trying to figure out why. And if I'm reading one of these paragraph notes, I don't know where in that paragraph talks about that. And then if I don't see it in that paragraph, then I have to go and get to another paragraph and hopefully mention it over there. And so this hunting for information in the face of unstructured free text narrative note consumes an enormous amount of time. One of the phrases I like is that free text kills, because it's hard to get info out of free text, and that time that's consumed by finding the information is, not good for patient care, not good for system efficiency. So, um, the key thing to, I think, driving efficiencies is structure things, and it's kind of an obvious point, right? Like, is it easier to find something that's in bedroom, or easier to find if it's nicely everything's folded and tucked away and you know where everything is, right? That would be the analogy there.
Is that also a problem that First History is working on solving?
We address part of the issue. So, because we structure our histories and they're clearly and consistently well organized. So the second you've been using them for a little bit, you'll know exactly where to expect everything in our notes. And then that just makes it easier to find stuff, easier to use. So we address part of that.
I think we can dive into the demo if you'd like to.
Fantastic. Okay. So I'm happy to show you the thing that we've been talking about. So there are three parts to the First History solution, as you might have intuited from before. There's what the patient sees, there's what the clinician sees, and then there's the data and analytics. And I'll take you through each part one at a time. So this is the welcome screen. The most common workflow for First History is you make an appointment with your clinician, and at the time you book the appointment, a text is sent to your phone. You click on the link, It opens First History, not an app. So you don't have to download any software. It's just web-based. And then you see a welcome screen like you're looking at here. There's lots of other ways to get here, but that's the most common one. And we can get into the details, other workflow later. So welcome screen, everything can be white labeled. It can be the organization's colors and everything can be customized. It can be done completed by the patient or somebody helping the patient, pediatrics or sometimes adult children with elderly parents can be an example where they can work together on their parent's story. And it begins by collecting some basic details about the patient. The example I'm going to show today is a patient who's been referred to their cardiologist because they've got a condition called atrial fibrillation. That's an irregular heartbeat of the heart that can cause a number of problems. Sometimes it can go too fast. Blood clots can form and break off and cause strokes. And so they've been referred to their cardiologist, and this is when the link was sent. And so they remember that they've been referred because of atrial fibrillation. And the key thing here is that First History then begins to ask a series of questions that are based on the previous answers. And it takes the patient through in a logical, sequenced way. This has been optimized for a mobile form factor, so easy to complete on iPhones, Androids, but it can also be used on tablets, desktops, kiosks. It is form factor neutral in terms of completing it. And the key thing here is that the questions that are being asked are the questions that if you were in person with your cardiologist, in this case, because cardiology, that they would want answers to. And it takes you through each question naturally setting up the next question. And, the triggering factors, how often it happens, and sort of an inventory of current symptoms. It then moves on to past medical history. So things that have gone on before because this physician hasn't seen the patient before. And the key thing here is that it's asking very specific questions. Have you required shocking to convert your heart rate? And this is very specific to atrial fibrillation. If they presented with something else like angina, it wouldn't ask that question. It wouldn't ask about surgery. But because they've got AFib, atrial fibrillation, these questions are relevant. It's asking about anticoagulation, which is relevant. Rate control, these are medications that control the rate of the heart. These are more medications to control the rate of the heart. Once again, common medications in atrial fibrillation. And so each one of these questions is asked for a very specific reason, like stroke, like atrial fibrillation can cause stroke. And so all of these questions have a purpose. Blood pressure and alcohol can both cause atrial fibrillation as well. These are other medications that are common in atrial fibrillation, aspirin, Plavix. I will just continue here. Common investigations. And if I answered yes to any of this, it asks for more information. But I think you get the idea, so I'm just answering no to save time. You can ask about those things that people do but shouldn't be doing, like smoking and vaping and recreational drugs. And if I click on yes to this, it will ask for more information. But to save time in this case, I'm just going to click no. So it's now asking about specifics about the medication. It said this is a blood thinner, and it's now suggesting the common frequencies and the common dosages of this. It then can ask about other medications that the patient is on. And so just type in 3 letters, brings up all the common NOR meds, and then it brings up the common frequencies and common dosages for that med. So it is insanely fast to enter your medications into the application. And actually, it built an application where you could take a picture of the pill bottle label, and this is way faster. So patients like this, and they can do it at home while they've got the time to do it. It then asks other questions that are important but often get overlooked, like, are you falling? If you're on a blood thinner and you're falling, that's a big concern. And because this person is older, asking questions about functional status. So the person was 30, they would not be asking these questions. In this case, they are. And then one last question about a heart valve, and they get to rate the application and hit submit. So that's the patient experience. We're multilingual. We're in English, French, Arabic, and Spanish. It can take pictures. It can do signatures, consents. There's body maps. There is an opportunity for free text if you want to do that. It's multimodal, so very flexible and can adapt to the clinical circumstance. So that was the patient experience. So here is the clinician, and the clinician gets a report, which typically they would see in their electronic medical record, but it can be sent elsewhere. So what you'll see here, this is the report. While they were completing their history, they were also being screened for a clinical research trial called the LILAC-TIMI 76 trial. It was asking the questions related to trial eligibility, and then they screen positive as being eligible. So it flags this here, and it can alert the clinician, or it can send it to the trial coordinator or somebody else. And it's just part of the care. So the patient can't tell they're being screened, which is obviously a good patient experience. It then calculates the pertinent positives, the pertinent negatives, because often the symptoms you're not having are as important as the symptoms as you are. It then does risk scores and calculators. So, like the CHAD-VASc score is a series of questions related to stroke risk. It asks those questions, it calculates the score, it displays the score, and then it checks to see if they're on the right question. And because the CHAD-VASc here is 2 or more, they should be on anticoagulation, and they are. Asked another score called HAS-BLED. That's the risk of bleeding if you're on anticoagulants. And then you can see it clearly lays out the social and functional history medications. LLM can convert this all to a narrative paragraph output. And there's lots of other things we can do to this as well. We can map it out to ICD-10 codes and other data and analytics. So there's a lot we can do with that. And then the third part is the enterprise data and analytics. And I'll just take you through some of the functionality with our real-time analytics. Everything I'm going to show you here is real-time data. And this, in many ways, is the most important screen, the patient experience. And this is over 2 million histories. Patients, 4.52, our most consistent finding. They like it. And because they like it, these are our completion rates, and it's very efficient to do. And this is so important because if they didn't like it and didn't complete it, it wouldn't matter what questions are in the application. This is the foundation for everything. But once we've got patients liking and completing it, we can ask things like social determinants of health. What is your living situation? Do you have living concerns around pests or mold? We can ask all those questions. We can ask about food insecurity and transportation and utilities and financial insecurity. We can ask all of those questions, all of which have a huge impact on patients and their health status and their ability to access care. We can have real-time data, and this is data from across our network on adherence to guideline-directed medical therapy. There's 4 categories of drugs you should be taking if you've got heart failure. These are the 4 pillars of heart failure, and you can see them here. And 3 things that are notable about this. First, this is real-time data. This is the actual numbers in real time. 2, these numbers are low. They should be way, way, way higher, low 70, 80, 90%. And 3, they're very accurate. This is exactly what's reported in the medical literature. And so what the patients are reporting is accurate. And we sometimes get that question, are the patients reporting accurate stuff? And the answer to that is yes. And we know because we've got data to confirm that. We can geomap all of the data. So all geographically mapped. Here's data, New Brunswick, in real time, viral outbreak data measured in real time. And I think that's very exciting. We have the ability to ask questions around disease-specific dashboards. Here's a dashboard for diabetes, monitoring key eye exams, blood tests, microvascular, macrovascular, so small blood vessel, large blood vessel, track comorbidities, and the rate of medication usage. And we can do all this in real time. And a key thing is we can add panels all the time. So somebody asked us around allergic rhinitis. There's a score called the rhinitis control assessment test that I hadn't heard of until about 6 weeks ago. And we embed the questions for the rhinitis control assessment test. We can ask the questions, show the data for each question, then show if they're on appropriate medications or not. And we can do all of that in real time. So that's a quick overview of the data and analytics for First History.
This is amazing. Uh, do the patients who fill out the forms have to refill the forms, or do they have their own profile with First History?
So we have in the initial intake form, and then if they're doing follow-ups, we can, do a different form for follow-ups.
Will patients eventually have an option to view regional information about the disease that they have?
So, yes. So at this point in time, we don't give the patients their histories right now, but shortly on our roadmap, patients will get a copy of their history. The thing that we can do today, another thing is that those data panels, we can present them to your clinician. So your nurse practitioner physician would have those data panels available to them to see what their practice is like. And shortly we'll embed that in community, right? It'd be good to have data on what you're doing and see what everybody else is up to.
This is really cool.
Okay, thanks. It is cool, actually. I have to admit, like, why do I get out of bed in the morning? Like, it is awesome to have this information. I think it is going to be enormously powerful and drive all kinds of changes. Very useful for continuing medical education, for physicians, for example, part of for specialists, they call it section 3 credits, but you need to evaluate your own practice. This is your practice evaluation data right there for you. And primary care, the same, and other health disciplines have similar needs as well too. And so we can provide that feedback in real time.
Any rollouts in Ontario?
We have a number of projects underway in Ontario, both in primary care and specialty care. We got projects in whole bunch of different areas, things like cardiology, respirology, um, uh, gastroenterology, pain medicine. So it can be, yeah, so we're used in a variety of care settings.
Are there any questions I should have asked, Chris?
Oh, this should have asked my, no, this has been great, actually. I think it's a huge opportunity. It's the missing hub of the wheel in terms of healthcare at this point in time, right? Because the medical interview is pretty much as it's been. People are now getting generative AI to listen to interviews, which is great, but they don't ask the questions. So if you don't ask, they don't hear it. And you still have to ask questions. All that takes time. So the right answer, and we've got a number of practices that use both. So get first history to ask before, get the scribe to listen, and that's a really powerful combination.
Have you ever used this with one of your own patients?
I haven't myself personally used it because of the nature of my practice. I've seen it in action with clinical practice, and I've got a bunch of colleagues who have used it, and they've told me what it's like to have it. It's really transformative in the sense that it eliminates the friction of asking a question. In an interview, I'm not doing this consciously, but subconsciously, I'm always saying, is it worth the time to ask this question? Because when you ask a patient a question, you then have to wait for them to think of the answer. And sometimes that's fast, and sometimes it's slow. And so I say, when did your headache start? And sometimes patients go, I really don't know. Let me think about that. But you don't have the time, you know what I mean? Well, that's time. And then you have to wait for them to give an answer. And sometimes they can give a consistent answer, like it started two weeks ago. But other times they'll give answers. Well, I was driving with my sister to Buffalo, and on it goes. And they tell a big story about when it's happening. And I just need to know a time unit, and they're telling me a story. And so that's another strength of first history because it separates the data collection from the story. Because patients do need their story to be told. That's super important. Well, it's actually, they're telling you that because it's meaningful. And so you want to enable both. And first history enables you to do both. And that's a win for everybody.
That's great. One of the issues with collecting data in multiple countries that have less standardization than we might over here is, the physicians might not have time to actually type in the notes. For example, I was speaking to somebody who was saying that Chinese doctors see 200 patients in the morning, and therefore they do not have time like they do over here to actually type up electronic medical records. And so something like this could greatly improve the data collection and potentially outcomes of patients in countries like that as well.
100%. Absolutely, right? You're just seeing 200 patients. You're not doing a full history on the wall. Listen, I've got an inkling there that you may skip a few questions. So, certainly true. We can ask all the questions would be fantastic in that setting. But I would say even in the Canadian context, your average physician probably sees 25 to 40 patients a day, and they still don't have time to ask all the questions. And the other problem, patients don't have one problem, they have 5 or 6 problems. Um, we have a solution for ophthalmology, for example. I thought, well, ophthalmology sounds like a one system problem. I'm sure their histories are simple. Not true. Very complicated, and they have more than one problem because they've got dry eye, they've got glaucoma, they have diabetic retinopathy, they've got refraction, like a whole bunch of problems. And so it's actually very complicated. And then a lot of healthcare is expressed through the eye. And so the retinal exam is a direct exam of the vascular system. And so there's a big overlap with cardiac, metabolic, renal, all affect the eye. So it's actually very involved. If you're going to do a good history and take care of the patient, then you do want that full complete data set.
What is it like right now if a doctor wants to evaluate a patient for a particular medical trial?
Good question. Because it's interesting. I was a primary care physician back in the day before I went and specialized in internal medicine and critical care. So I spent 3 years in primary care. And back then I was excited to enroll patients in clinical trials. And I was all excited. And then I went out and then I ran into the real world because I could never remember the trial criteria, let alone have time to ask for it in the middle of the day and then document it. That was super hard. Could never number of patients recruited in my primary care career was exactly zero. Couldn't do it at all. And it's still a barrier. But if you got first history, asking all the questions for all the trials, and you don't even have to know. You don't even have to know that that trial existed. And we can do it automatically. Right now, only 4% of patients participate in a clinical trial during their lifetime. So 96% of everybody never participates in a trial. And the consequence of that, and this is well known, that we are not always recruiting representative samples of people out there. It's skewed towards certain populations and not towards other populations. So if we want to make trial recruitment more representative and more inclusive and reach precisely those communities that are not participating in trials, so you don't have to pick or choose. Patient sees you and they're being screened. And so that I think super exciting. We're in the process of working with New Brunswick around precisely doing that. We're going to start with some clinical trials in New Brunswick, and we think that that is a huge opportunity because everybody should be screened all the time. There shouldn't be this separation between the two.
If you can gather this information about what criteria there are for clinical trials, can you do something similar for new drugs on the market?
Well, exactly. And so there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 3 trial, that's the final stage. It's usually a randomized controlled trial of some sort that, compares drug to standard of care. They find drug better, and that's we're critical, and we can definitely help with phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And then there's phase 4, real world evidence. Now that the drug's out there in the real world, is it actually living up to what they found in the trial? Sometimes what people find in on the real world is different. Trials are unusual for a number of different reasons, and so we can help very well with that real world evidence aspect of how the drugs are actually working in real world practice. And it gives you more of a detail like who's using it and what are the other medical conditions they have. And this is why trials are complicated because patients are one problem entities. They've got all kinds of other things. They're taking multiple drugs. And what happens when all of those interact in the real world and is it seeing the real benefit? And so we can definitely help with that.
Brilliant. So you're actively removing the physician bottleneck.
We absolutely we're complementing, and I think this is a really important thing. We're not replacing the physician. These AI solutions, like we're not replacing them. I think that's a mistake. We're working with and augmenting the clinician's expertise. We're automating the routine part of the interview so that the physician or nurse practitioner or clinician can focus on that which is unique. And it's just enabling it. So we're building capacity and doing the routine things. My son was seen at Sick Kids recently for a condition, and he's being seen by the head of the department for that specialty. So this is an internationally renowned expert in that field. 45-minute appointment. The first 22 minutes are him asking basic questions like, how often does he poo? And how hard it is to poo. This guy has probably got 300 or 400 papers to their name, and they're asking my kid about how often he poops. Like, it's such bad use of skill set. And on the other hand, he's got an issue, and it's complicated. And I'd rather spend time talking about the treatment prognosis, what are we going to do next, rather than just this data collection. And so that just drove it home for me personally, in terms of my son's condition and just how that experience could have been better.
I can't wait for all the hospitals in Ontario to adopt this.
I share a similar viewpoint. And by the way, the care instinctive has been excellent. I'm not in any way, shape, or form denigrating tickets. It's been a phenomenal experience. And we're very, very happy with it. But it did occur to me there is an opportunity to do this just a bit more efficiently.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Very much. This has been fabulous. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, a quick note about the company I co founded, Private AI. We help organizations use their data safely so they can build compliant AI products, share data securely, and extract insights without the regulatory headaches. If PII, PHI, or PCI data are standing between you and your next innovation, visit private-ai.com. See you next time on the Data Frontier.